Welcome back to another episode of YOLO, You Only Live Once. My name is Cyril Lachel, and this is the show where we see how far I can get on a single life. Today we're going to take a look at the original Castlevania, which was first released in 1986 on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Since then, Konami has gone on to produce 24 sequels and another 10 spin-offs, including a fighting game that nobody wants to remember. Today I'm going to play through as much of this 8-bit classic as I can in a single life, while also filling in some of the history of Castlevania. So let's get this going. And right off the bat we have one of the most memorable introductions of all time as we see Simon Belmont walk into Castlevania. You know, at the time, critics were far from enthusiastic about Castlevania. The Game Machine, which was a magazine in the UK, gave it a 71% out of 100, and they complained about the unlimited continues and the arcade focus. A Nintendo Magazine System, another UK publication, liked the game a little bit more, giving it an 80%. They liked the vast platforming action, but ultimately recommended players wait for the sequel. Now you see the hearts that I'm picking up? These are the fuel for my special items. Every time I want to throw a dagger or an axe or something like that, it uses a couple of these hearts. This first stage here is pretty simple. You know, this game has been remade a whole bunch of times, though none of the versions are exactly the same. You may have heard of Vampire Hunter on the MSX or Haunted Castle in the arcade. There's also Super Castlevania 4 on the Super NES, and Castlevania Chronicle on the PlayStation. Each of those games is unique in its own way, but all of them use the original Castlevania as the jumping off point. It's actually really interesting to go back and see the similarities between all 5 versions of the game. As you can tell, this stage is fairly linear. A decade after it was released, Konami completely changed the focus of Castlevania with Symphony of the Night. Instead of simply playing through different stages, the whole game was one giant map to explore, not unlike Metroid. Oh right, here's the meat, which has been hidden away inside the walls of Castlevania for some time now. They say the castle only appears every 100 years, so I probably wouldn't eat that. But Simon Belmont dives right in, which is probably why people lived to the ripe old age of 32 back in those days. Anyway, as I was saying, Konami stuck with the Metroidvania formula for a couple more decades. They dabbled with the 3D installments here and there, but they seem to always go back to what made Symphony of the Night so memorable. And again, we're all still waiting for the high-definition, next-generation 2D side-scrolling Castlevania, so who knows. Speaking of Symphony of the Night, for a while there, it seemed like Castlevania always had the coolest subtitles. Not just Symphony of the Night, but Rondo of Blood, Harmony of Dissonance, Aria of Sorrow. In fact, I met a Konami employee at E3 one year that took full credit for coming up with the name Harmony of Dissonance. I did not believe him. Here, we run into the game's first boss, a fairly simple bat, although it's a really large bat. This will be my chance to finally use all those hearts I've been collecting. As you can see, this fight is considerably easier when you're lugging around the axe. Alright, looks like one last hit. There we go. Alright, now let's pick up this sphere and move on to stage 4. Well, first it looks like it needs to count down the time and give me some bonus points. Not that that's going to do us any good in this YOLO. And here we see the map. This idea was greatly expanded in Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. Speaking of which, defunctgames.com just posted a brand new episode of Review Crew where we take a look back at what critics thought of Castlevania 3 back in 1990. You might be surprised what magazines like GamePro and Electronic Gaming Monthly said 24 years ago. Or maybe you won't. Take a look. Apparently what I did there was I broke open the side of the castle, and that unearthed the hidden crown. High scores were kind of a big deal in the original Castlevania. Of course, the problem now is I just want to keep whipping up the sides of the castle just to see if there's more items or whatever. Castlevania was inspired by the classic Universal and Hammer line of horror films, which included the 1930s black and white classics starring Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff and whatnot. Speaking of which, Universal is going back and rebooting those classic horror films for a new generation. Unfortunately, the people involved are also responsible for writing The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Cowboys and Aliens, Transformers, and a whole bunch of other terrible films. What you should do is just go and watch Gods and Monsters and just be done with it. That's all you need to do. I won't be beating this game in a single life, but if I had, you'd be treated to a full credit sequence full of the developers' names with parodies of classic horror icons. There's Bram Stoker instead of Bram Stoker, Christopher B. instead of Christopher Lee, and Boris Karloff instead of, well, you know. I like the pink bricks the Dracula is using. So the people that worked on Castlevania would later go on to create Snake's Revenge, which is not considered part of the official Metal Gear canon. That was their only non-Castlevania game. They also made Castlevania 3, but disbanded immediately afterwards. More castle meat. Part of what makes this game so difficult is the fact that you have to get through a whole game in a single session. For whatever reason, Konami decided to not ship the Western release with a way to save your progress. Oddly enough, the Japanese version did have the ability to save. Of the 3 NES games, this was always my second favorite. Castlevania 3 is not only the best 8-bit game in the series, but also one of the best Castlevania games ever made. It's right up there with Rondo of Blood and, of course, Symphony. I hated Castlevania 2 back in the day, and you know what? I still do. It's just broken in so many crucial ways. Oh, hey, these things look like they're right out of Prince of Persia or something. Oh, no! Oh! Single. Who knew that it would kill me in a single hit? Well, folks, that brings us to the end of yet another episode of YOLO. I did not beat Castlevania, but then again, you know, I got pretty far. I got to level 6. That's pretty good for a single life. If you want more Castlevania content, don't forget to head on over to defunctgames.com. We'll be taking a look at Konami's long-running franchise all week long, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We have a bunch more Halloween-themed episodes of YOLO coming up, so you won't want to miss any of that. Until next time, my name is Cyril Lachel, and you've been watching a YOLO, You Only Live Once.